I know going to work is already a horror story, but true horror at work, I call that double the fright. I was fresh out of college, broke as a joke, and desperately seeking job that didn't involve explaining why the ice cream machine was broken for the millionth time or pretending to care about Karen's latte. Art preferences. I was firing off applications like confetti at a rich kid's birthday party, maybe hitting half the interviews, because apparently having an English degree makes you as employable as a chocolate teapot. I knew my qualification wasn't exactly screaming, "Hire me immediately," but I figured my options couldn't be that catastrophically limited. Still, I kept my chin up, stayed persistent, and exclusively targeted cushy office positions with actual benefits. My bank account was crying, but my dignity was still breathing. 3 weeks back, I scored a phone interview with this cybersecurity company called Proficient Technologies. They had tentacles stretching across the country and needed a fresh customer support specialist for their international department. Requirements seemed reasonable enough. Pleasant voice, decent grammar skills, basic tech knowledge, and willingness to work rotating day-night shifts. The office sat just 2 subway stops from my shoebox apartment. Plus, they offered health insurance. I applied, despite my tech knowledge being roughly equivalent to knowing how to restart my router when Netflix stops working. The phone screening went surprisingly well, and after 2 additional meetings with HR and management, they dropped a generous offer in my lap, considering I was basically a walking question mark in terms of experience. During my inaugural week, I had to work standard 9 to 5 hours so I could sync up with my manager, who was operating from some distant city. Afterward, I transitioned to their regular support rotation, a 4-day cycle featuring 1 day shift, 1 night shift, then 2 days off, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., then 9 p.m. to 9 a.m. respectively. On day 1, I dressed professionally in a loose sweater and modest skirt. Being acutely aware that IT departments are predominantly male territories, I wasn't about to provide ammunition for unwanted attention through provocative wardrobe choices. The front desk guy seemed normal enough. He introduced himself as Tom while helping me navigate paperwork and guiding me toward a workstation in their sprawling, open-plan workspace. I surveyed the endless sea of desks as we walked, finding it challenging to make eye contact with the men stationed behind them. The complete absence of other women in the workspace struck me as unusual and genuinely unsettling. Tom's relaxed demeanor couldn't compensate for the immediate hostility radiating toward my presence. The atmosphere seemed to thicken as I sensed my new colleagues mentally chanting, "You don't belong here," in perfect unison. I was surprised when Tom stopped at a desk extensively decorated with printed memes, bright pink floral stickers, and a small, tattered teddy bear keychain positioned behind the monitor. Beyond these personal artifacts, a thick dust layer coated the keyboard, monitor, and entire desk surface. "Oh, what the actual hell?" Tom muttered irritably. "I'm so sorry," he said, glancing quickly at my paperwork. "Gemma, this workstation should have been cleared ages ago. I'll need to have words with maintenance." "That's perfectly fine," I responded. "I can handle cleaning it myself, no problem whatsoever." Tom appeared skeptical, but a sweeping glance around the room confirmed no other available desks for my occupation. The remainder of that day passed in a complete haze. I learned my responsibilities involved answering support-related calls and creating new tickets in their system. I had to monitor all incoming chats and written tickets, sorting them by urgency level and category type. While I wouldn't be providing technical advice, I needed to become intimately familiar with their product software. Since I wasn't handling calls yet, I buried myself in the manual. I understood virtually nothing and spent most of my time Googling networks, black and white box testing, database security, and other mysterious concepts. My manager checked in before lunch and seemed slightly disappointed by my overall comprehension of the material. Feeling like a complete failure, I took a break to clean my workspace. I stood up to find Tom and request cleaning supplies for my desk surface. I immediately regretted this decision. Every eye in the room focused on me the moment I rose. I couldn't bring myself to stare back for confirmation, but there was a surreal silence as I navigated back through the workspace. The familiar keyboard clatter had noticeably diminished as my face grew warm and self-conscious. I noticed myself hunching forward slightly while walking, a pathetic attempt at becoming less visible. Before turning toward the passage leading to the front desk area, I dared to meet the eyes of one shameless gawker. I don't know what I expected, but the sight of a sneering hooded programmer sent chills down my spine. He appeared around my age, but showed no shame or discomfort at my confrontation. A cruel smile played across his thin lips as he examined my exposed ankles before returning attention to his screens. I wondered how he'd react if I stared at his long, pimpled neck with equal intensity. The return journey to my chair with computer wipes proved identical. However, some good emerged from that day. While cleaning desk drawers, I discovered a half-used notebook from the previous occupant. She never wrote her first name, only an initial followed by a surname, S. Brooks. Based on the desk decorations, I was certain she was another girl like me. Her abandoned belongings provided some comfort, but her notebook proved to be genuine treasure. In it, my predecessor had summarized and simplified the entire manual, using understandable terms and explanations for the intimidating terminology and complicated instructions. With her assistance, I managed to surprise my manager with my product knowledge at shift's end. After a productive workday, I braved the workspace once more to explore the kitchen before heading home. Tom had advertised a top-tier coffee machine and snacks, and I was starving after such an emotionally and intellectually demanding day. Besides, all my credit cards were maxed out, and I wanted to load up on free cookies. As I approached, I heard enthusiastic chatter and even some laughter from the kitchen area. Foolishly, I hoped my kitchen-dwelling colleagues would prove warmer, more welcoming, or at minimum civil. Instead, the small kitchen space fell perfectly silent upon my entrance. 5 men of different ages and sizes sat around a cheap-looking cafeteria table, all staring directly at me. "Rough first day?" inquired a sardonic, medium-pitched voice. I lifted my gaze from the floor tiles and scanned the group for my addresser. It wasn't difficult to recognize the self-assured, hooded figure who had stared me down earlier. "You must be very experienced," he continued snarkily, brushing greasy black hair from his eyes. "To land such a comfortable position, you must be quite the wizard." "What is this, high school?" I blurted out. I'm not usually confrontational, but this was honestly excessive. Hostility is one thing, social awkwardness another, but this was beginning to resemble a cheesy 80s high school drama with 30-year-old actors playing teenagers. "I'm just here for coffee. If you question my qualifications for this position, you can take your concerns directly to HR," I continued, enjoying the shocked and somewhat nervous expressions on my offenders' faces. Good. I wanted them to experience a fraction of the discomfort I'd been enduring all day. Opting to enjoy my snack far from my colleagues, I walked back to my desk with my head held high and a coffee mug. Just as I was about to sit and enjoy my frothy treat, I noticed a text message from a withheld number. "You have quite an attitude, don't you?" I froze, hovering over my desk with a mug in one hand and my phone in the other. While attempting to process this serious boundary violation, I received 2 more messages within the same chat window. One was a naked photograph I had sent my first serious college boyfriend. The second read, "Why don't you take that photo to HR?" Obviously, I was deeply disturbed by this privacy invasion. Shame crept in, and I felt angry about attracting so much unwanted attention. This was entirely my fault. I had entered an office full of ethical hackers with a common dog name as my password. Undoubtedly, the photograph had circulated thanks to my disgusting coworker, and I was now the silent laughingstock of the office. Leaving my coffee untouched, I signed off and headed home, holding back tears until I reached subway safety. I couldn't stop crying for most of that night, replaying the day's events in my mind, feeling sick every time I imagined my coworkers leering at my naked body. Around 3 a.m., however, I realized there was no sense continuing the pity party. I needed to devise an action plan to survive this workplace. Quitting wasn't an option because their offered salary was far too good to abandon. Besides, I was literally surviving on barely more than pizza slice daily rations. My second option was reporting to HR, but there was no way I was opening that particular can of worms. I couldn't prove who had sent those messages. Last option: stick with it, keep my head down, do the job they hired me for, and ignore all further harassment attempts. That's exactly what I did. Throughout my training week, I arrived punctually, never leaving my desk except for bathroom breaks. I avoided contact with everyone and kept my eyes focused solely on inanimate objects. Thanks to S. Brooks, I stayed on top of my training. For every new task from my manager, there was a corresponding entry in her notebook. There were no more horrible texts or face-to-face confrontations, but something else stirred my anxieties. Last Friday was my final training day, which brought me to the notebook's last entry: Night Shift Survival Guide. Sleep during the day before shift and don't fall asleep. Don't let anyone in. Keep pepper spray nearby. Check every aisle, meeting room. Don't forget to check under desks, balcony, kitchen, tables, behind cooler. Have Skype open with credit for emergencies in case of disabled mobile service. Check in with friend, lover every hour. The list made little sense. Firstly, HR made it clear I was allowed to sleep between 2 and 5 a.m., provided I kept the office smartphone nearby. They even had a pull-out couch in one conference room for this purpose. Secondly, the entire job involved answering calls, so there would always be a way to call from the office phone, right? Lastly, the measures outlined in the guide seemed excessive and paranoid. Perhaps the list was satirical. Maybe this Brooks girl felt just as awkward as I did with all the silent, leering male co-workers. Though my brain worked hard to rationalize this precautionary list, a nagging gut feeling told me I was missing something crucial. It came to me as I was leaving work on Friday, my last training day. "Tom," I approached him timidly. "Could I ask you a question?" "Sure thing," he responded, smiling warmly. His pleasant features were a far cry from those of the sullen men in the main room. "I was just wondering why I haven't seen any other customer support agents. I mean, there should be at least 3 more people to cover the 4-day rotation cycle." "You have to ask your manager about that. Most likely, they're scattered across the country." "Pretty normal for that to be the case," he replied, already dismissing me as he returned to his final weekly tasks. "Was there an agent who worked here before me?" I continued, eager to learn more about the girl who filled the notebook I'd been using all week. "Yes, another girl held your position briefly," Tom said, still looking at his screen, though I noticed he had stopped typing or moving his mouse. He was staring pointedly at a single spot behind his monitor. "Tom," I narrowed my eyes. "Who is the guy working at the desk that's just at the turnoff into the main workspace? Pale complexion, skinny, dark, curly hair?" I said, waving a finger at my temple, poorly imitating curly lock. "Ah, that's Sam," Tom replied, noticeably attentive to my line of inquiry. "Any reason you're asking? Has he been bothering you?" "No," I said rather more dismissively than I felt. "Have a good weekend, Tom." "See you," he said, watching me questioningly as I left. All weekend, I mulled over my first week's events. It felt as though Tom wasn't telling me something important. There was no reason for him to grow so tense at the mention of the girl who had worked there before me. Could someone have complained about Sam before? Could it have been S. Brooks? Was Sam the reason for the survival guide in the notebook? Why did she quit? A million theories disturbed my weekend lounging. Before I knew it, it was time to return to work. This is where we've almost caught up to present events. Yesterday was Monday, the first regular day shift. It passed in a blur as I frantically answered phones, recording, sorting, and assigning dozens of customer complaints in our system. It took getting used to, and by day's end, I was absolutely exhausted. Just as I was signing off, I received another ominous text from an unknown number. "You're such a hard worker. Can't wait to see you take on night shift." This was the first text to fill me with genuine fear. I quickly looked around to see if Sam was still at work so I could confront him about sending the message, but he had already left for the day. After calming myself down, I headed home and tried to find S. Brooks online. My best bet was LinkedIn, and I searched through all women who had proficient technologies listed on their profiles. They were suspiciously few. Finding nothing, I looked through Tom's friend list and finally found what I was seeking. There was a girl named Sierra Brooks listed as unemployed. I sent a friend request with a message introducing myself and asking if she had ever been harassed by a previous coworker. Finally feeling like I was making progress, I went to bed and braced myself for the next day's events. I decided there were some advantages to the irregular work schedule when I got to sleep in on Tuesday. I checked my LinkedIn soon after waking around 1 p.m. There were no signs of activity from Sierra, so I went about preparing for my first night shift at the office. I was slightly nervous, but mostly excited to know my workplace more intimately. Without the day crowd, I was free to walk around the space, binge on cookies, spit in Sam's mug, whatever. There was still a few late workers when I arrived for my shift, but I didn't pay much attention to them as I had numerous calls and chats to handle. 2 hours in, however, the stream of calls, chats, and incoming tickets began to wind down until they stopped altogether around 11 p.m. I leaned back in my chair and surveyed the workspace. There was no one left at the office as far as I could see. All the lights were on, but as I removed my headphones, I heard a low jingling melody playing from somewhere. It sounded like a Christmas carol, but it was hard to determine where it was coming from. There was no reason for this to scare me, but I felt the hairs on my arms prick up in alarm. As I stood up from my chair, the melody ceased. Now, I freaked out over less in the past. I once thought a man was following me at night, until he walked right past me to the corner store ahead. Although I lived alone, I'd always double and triple check my locks before bed. I had to admit that my fears were probably unwarranted. Someone had left their headphones connected to their computer with music turned up. Or maybe there was an office party for a different company downstairs. Hearing music is only scary in strategically written horror flicks, right? Right? Rationalizing aside, I checked the office to ensure I was actually alone. Walking through the aisles of connected desks, I realized how lucky I was to have my secluded corner spot. I might not have been able to handle such close quarters with any of my unpleasant co-workers. Checking all the rows, I went back to the front desk area, lingering over Tom's desk, inspecting his belongings in search of clues. Finding nothing of interest, I went back through the main room to the kitchen. My nerves were already easing up, and I found myself spending more time taste-testing cookies rather than looking for potential fiends behind curtains. I had to stop indulging mid-cookie, however, because the sound of the melody returned while I was in the kitchen, louder this time. At the same moment, my work smartphone, which we had to carry around if we left our post, buzzed with a text message from a random number. Finally got to the cookies, huh? My entire body stiffened as I processed the implications. It was probable that Sam had not left the office and was now screwing with me. I pricked up my ears and listened carefully. There was no one in the kitchen as far as I could see or hear. Also, if Sam was in the main workspace, it wouldn't be difficult to guess that I was eating cookies. Breathing out slowly, I ignored the melody to see if I could hear anything else. Nothing. Slowly, I walked to the kitchen drawers and found a large knife. Did I know how to use a knife? No. Would my wild jabs ward off an unarmed opponent? Definitely. I was about to head into the workspace when a call came in on the work phone. I positioned myself safely against the kitchen wall, knife in hand, before answering with the standard customer support greeting. There was static on the other end, some clanking noises, followed by complete silence. Glancing at the phone, I saw that it had switched off. I tried to start it up again, but it wouldn't turn on. Great. Now I had to make it back to my computer in case any more calls came in. I remembered Sierra's guide as I was slipping the dead device back in my pocket. Have Skype open with credit for emergencies in case of disabled mobile service. Had this happened to her as well? The instructions in the notebook made much more sense, and I cursed myself out loud for being so ill-prepared. As soon as the words escaped my mouth, there was another ominous bing from the phone. I pulled it out and tried to unlock it, but the regular home screen didn't appear. All that came up was a white screen with a short bit of text on it. Tut tut, ladies really shouldn't use that sort of language. As soon as I read it, the screen cleared and more text appeared. Why don't you come out and play? Don't bother taking that knife with you. It won't do much against my gun. I threw the phone across the room and dashed to my computer. The melody grew louder as I approached my desk, finding a pink stuffed pig toy. There was a fabric button on its left hoof with a music note on it. This was the source of the music, and proved without a shadow of doubt that there was someone else in the office. What's more, they were watching my every move and actively trying to scare me with children's toys. Panic coursed through my body, gearing up for fight or flight. I took a deep breath, attempting to lull my nervous system. So far, I had heard no signs of anyone moving around the office. There were some background city noises coming from outside, and the rhythmic hum of computers that someone forgot to shut off. If my stalker was moving around, I would need to pinpoint their location to plan my escape. Also, I had to get help fast. Moving the toy aside, I sat down in my chair and pulled up the Skype for Business application. I quickly dialed 911, putting the stationary phone on speaker. The dial tone was brief, and there was a live operator on the other end. Within moments, I was about to give a very hasty account of events when someone grabbed my ankle from underneath the desk. I screamed hellfire, jerking my leg away and running as fast as my legs could take me. I heard some commotion close behind me, followed by a loud bang, which I interpreted as my assailant giving chase. Before I knew it, I was descending 3 flights of stairs and rushing out the doors past the startled night guard. The freezing air prickled my skin through my thin sweater as I approached a nearby pedestrian for help. They called 911, and the police were at the office space within the hour. As I awaited with the guard for their arrival, I kept thinking of Sierra's written warnings and how stupid I had been to dismiss them. Check every aisle, meeting room. Don't forget to check under desks, balcony, kitchen, tables, behind cooler. The police quickly took down my account of events and, leaving me in the care of a young officer, went upstairs to inspect the office. There had been no one coming or going from the building since I ran out, so it was possible that the culprit was still hiding somewhere inside. The thought made me nauseous, and I shifted closer to my armed companion. Not long after the cops left us, the young officer's radio crackled, and several voices spoke one over the other, asking for backup and naming codes I couldn't understand. Things escalated quickly from there. Instead of going home, I was taken to a police station and held in an interrogation room for hours before someone finally came to speak to me. I was tired, miserable, and confused at the way the night's events were unfolding. I wanted to go home, but spent several more hours recounting my story to two detectives. "So you had the knife with you when running from the kitchen to your desk? Are you sure?" asked the older detective, who had introduced himself as Senior Investigator Barnshaw. Yes," I stammered nervously. "I believe I did. I was panicking, so it's hard to say." "Then there was the pig toy," I said, losing my train of thought. "And you believe the person who was harassing you was Samuel Guilford?" said the other detective, whose name I couldn't remember. "He wore no badge. I don't know his full name, but I can't imagine anyone else is responsible. And one more time, just for the record, what happened when you dialed 911? asked Barnshaw for the third time that night. "Someone grabbed my leg, my ankle actually. This happened before I had the chance to explain the situation to the operator. I screamed and ran until I found a stranger outside who let me call for help." I responded, growing weary of the cyclical questioning. "Samuel Guilford was found lying dead not far from your desk when our officers came on the scene. Did you see his body when you were running out of the office?" asked the other detective, feigning an air of innocence while dropping this bombshell. My jaw fell open, and I stared at the interrogators in naked shock and terror. "No," I croaked. "I don't understand." "He was stabbed to death with a large kitchen knife. His body was covered in 23 stab wounds," Barnshaw explained. "And we found the knife wedged in his mouth, pinning him to the floor through his throat. We have reason to suspect it was the knife you've described to us in your statement," added the second detective. I eyed both detectives mutely, straining to focus when my mind seemed to have lost all clarity. "Your story checks out for the most part. We found his phone riddled with amateur hacking apps," continued the senior detective. "We found several naked photographs of you and all the texts you've mentioned. He had a gun in his hand, and we found the bullet he fired as you fled. What we don't understand is how he died," added the second detective, keenly gauging my reaction. "It's okay if you killed him in self-defense, Gemma. The guy was a creep." "I didn't," I stammered. "I swear, I had no idea." Oh God," I cried out helplessly. "I mean, just a month ago, a report was filed against him by another co-worker," said Barnshaw. "Sierra," I murmured. "You knew Miss Brooks?" asked the second detective, suspicion flaring in his eyes. "No," I insisted. "I got her desk and her notebook. I should have mentioned it before." "What did the report say?" Barnshaw scrutinized my face before meeting his partner's eye. Some sort of unspoken exchange took place before they decided to disclose the terrible things that had happened to Sierra, things that had so nearly happened to me. Sierra Brooks had come straight to a nearby hospital from her first night shift 3 months ago. She was badly beaten and bruised, wanting to register an anonymous rape kit. The damage to her reproductive organs was severe, and she had to get stitches. She filed a police report 2 months later when she failed her probationary period at Proficient Technologies. Losing her JOBA only way to pay off her medical debt. It was her word against Sam Guilford's, who had expensive legal counsel as well as countless co-workers to vouch for his respectable character. It was just yesterday that Miss Brooks came by to drop all charges against Samuel, said the younger detective. We are currently attempting to track her down and bring her in for questioning. I'm sure you can see how your knowledge of her name gives us cause for concern. The police kept up their line of questioning until someone brought Barnshaw a note. Forensics had drawn up a report on the fingerprints found on the knife, as well as the blood spatter patterns. I was asked to submit some DNA samples to aid the investigation, and finally released to go home. At home, exhausted as I was, I couldn't sleep. I had none of my belongings back. My handbag, phone, and even coat were all submitted as evidence, so I turned to my old, trusty laptop, hoping that some aimless browsing could help soothe my nerves. My browser was still on LinkedIn from the day before, and I refreshed the page out of habit. A small red icon showed that I had a new message. Sierra had replied to me, "Don't worry, sis, I took care of it."